So here we were in the 1970s, 1980s, believing that previous scholars had gotten it wrong. David Simmons, in his Great New Zealand Myth, had shown how Percy Smith had really constructed a history, because he'd taken a document that had been manipulated over the decades by a series of scholars. It was originally written in Māori, translated into English. The English translation was put back into Māori. New additions are made to the text. So the text goes through this history of its own until it comes out as a series of statements that was constructed as history. And Percy Smith said, well, he took a series of tribal traditions and he said, well, these parts don't fit, but let's put them all into historical framework so it's history. And that was really accepted right until the 1960s and 70s. And then Simmons came along and he said, no, we have to go back to the original primary sources. He's doing what historians do, because we all believe if we get the earliest document, it's going to be the absolute factual text that tells us what von Ranke said, what really happened, how it actually was. So we all went back to the libraries to go through the original documents. Now we've made a mistake, and this was where one of the next really quite fascinating scholars that came out with, and that was Margaret Orbell. And that's the last slide that we have, clip 13. Orbell said Smith and Simmons have made the same historical mistake. Now read Orbell's text, and this is really what I want you to understand. Orbell said, you know, the problem is we see these texts as historical facts. Historians believe they can peel back these embellishments like an onion and get to the kernel of truth. You know, you just peel back these embellishments like we do with the Bible. We think we can find the facts in the Bible, right? But she said, what you really need to understand are the cultural drivers in these stories. Māori were talking in a different framework, in a different worldview. And she said this, their oral traditions need to be seen as religious narratives or as mythic narratives. Now, the great fault of her argument is that she said they're religious narratives. Probably mythic would have been a better word, maybe not. But that's essentially what she said. Now, there's a weakness, there's a strength to her argument. She said the problem, and go through the document and see why she makes these arguments, and go online to the Te Ara Online readings, see what her arguments really are about. So that's your job as scholars at this stage, to track down their arguments, find the examples and the evidence that they use for the argument. But why does she say these traditions need to be seen as religious narratives? Well, quite simply, what do we do when our elders say that they came here on the back of a whale? Do we really believe they came here on the back of a whale? And what we're forced to do as historians is explain it, to rationalize it. Right? We always do those types of things. She's saying that they mean other things relevant to the culture. Now, she doesn't use whale rider, but she uses other examples. And she has a fascinating text that you need to go to for your tutorial work. And I'm going to finish it off with this. In the tutorial text and in her book, she refers to the incident where Edward Tregear visits an old tohunga, tribal priest. And the tohunga says, this red rock is my ancestor. And Tregear does what we'd all do. He tries to rationalize it. Do you mean that's where the ancestor died? That blood represents as the color of the rock? What do you mean? It's a historical memory aid? And the tohunga said, the old man said, that rock is my ancestor. Now, Orbell says, what Tregear and every Western scholar has done since is they've tried to rationalize it and turn this mythic, other cultural worldview into a Western view where there's facts that we can understand it. And what she simply says is that you need to understand the stories from within their cultural context. They're not factual statements. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of political things going on here. We don't need to worry about that. But there is a good logic in her arguments. Think about the political consequences of her statements. Māori, for example, would say, well, if our canoe traditions are fabrications and are mythical, what does that mean for the captains of their canoes? Were they mythical? Because the leaders of these canoes are great leaders, according to Māori. And every generation after that, where does myth become history? Because we all descend from these canoes. Some of these canoes go back 20 generations, 40 generations. But somewhere along the chronology, where does history occur? That's enough from me, and I'm not sure whether that's enough from me at the moment. Go through these clips, think about them, and read them with the slide. After that, send me your questions on the forum. Okay, thank you.